Welcome back, everybody. Today is the start of our last unit, our new unit. So Chapter 8 is going to be a unit about finance. So we're going to talk a little bit about loans, different types of interest rates for investments or for money borrowed, and whether it's simple interest or compound interest, those types of deals. And in the problems that we're going to be focusing on, we will be dealing with interest rates, which are generally given as percents. We got to be able to make those decimals, fractions. So we want to be able to convert between the different types of amounts, and then solve some basic percent problems. So what is a percent? Well, the word percent has a literal translation. The word percent literally translates to out of 100. Out of 100. So when you read something like 85%, that literally translates into 85 out of 100. Okay, so any percent you have, if you have X percent, that is the same thing as X out of 100. Whatever that percent is, you literally just slap it over 100. That is the same meaning. Okay, now percentages we see can be rewritten as fractions, and we know that fractions can be rewritten as decimals, and we again need to be able to convert between the different formats. So you can take any percent and write it as a fraction or a decimal, take any fraction, make it a decimal or percent, take any decimal, make it a fraction or percent. So all those, we got to be able to get from one form to the other. So I have some basic rules here that we can try to follow, although hopefully we know most of these. If you want to go from fractions to decimals, we convert fractions to decimals by dividing. Just divide your numerator by your denominator. If we're going to go from decimals to percents or decimals to percentages, then we want to multiply by 100. And basically that makes your decimal move to the right twice. So if you can remember how to move the decimal, then you don't have to really worry about the multiplying by 100. If you're not sure, then multiply by 100. Now if you want to go from a fraction to a percent, then we're going to have to take two steps. To go from a fraction to a percent, we go from fraction to decimal, and then decimal to percent. So we would convert to a decimal and then multiply by the 100. If we're going to go from a decimal to a fraction, that's one of the harder ones. Just because we forget, but you're going to take your number and put it over the place value of your decimal and then reduce. If you're going to go from a percentage to a fraction, percentages to fractions, we put the number over 100, that's what I showed you a few minutes ago, and reduce. And if we're going to go from percentages to decimals, then you're going to divide by 100, which basically means you're moving the decimal to the left twice. Okay, so we're going to try this out. Let's say we have a fraction like 3 over 25. If we want to take that fraction 3 over 25 and make it a decimal, we are literally dividing 3 by 25. So 3 divided by 25, we can see our decimal amount is 0.12. So 0.12 is the decimal. Now if we want to take a decimal and make it a percent, we are multiplying by 100. So if I take my 0.12 and multiply by 100, then we have 12%. So this is 12%. Okay, now let's say we start with the decimal like 0.761. I think to get to the percent is the easiest thing to do. So if we take 0.761 and multiply by 100, we're looking at 76.1%. So 76.1%. Again, that's just moving the decimal, so if you're okay with that, then by all means use that method. Now if we have to take 0.761 and make it a fraction, 0.761, so in this fraction, this would be the tenths place of the fraction. This would be the hundredths place of the fraction. Hundredths, I don't know how to spell that. And then this would be the thousandths place. This thousandths place. So because this decimal goes out to the thousandths place, to make it a fraction, you would take this number and put it over 1,000. So if it only went to the hundredths place, put it over 100. If it went to the tenths place, put it over 10, and so on. So we would make this 7 turn the pen on, 761 over 1,000 because it's in the thousands place. And then you just want to reduce that fraction, which actually Desmos can do both of these things for you. If you put in 0.761 and hit the little in the blue, see how it shows a fraction? If you hit the fraction, it will turn it into a fraction for you. And if it's reducible, it would reduce it. Now 761 over 1,000 doesn't reduce because I can see that there. Now you can also just put in your 761 over 1,000 and you can see that same decimal, and again you can convert it. If the fraction reduced, let me just show you one. If you put 4 over 8 in there, it automatically reduces the fraction to a half. So 761 over 1,000 didn't reduce, so we're going to leave this, and let me center it because it looks funny, 761 over 1,000. Okay? Then the last one, we have a percent already, and we want to be able to work backwards here. So if we have 104%, so if I multiplied by 100 to go this way, then I would have to divide by 100 to go this way. So if I took my 104 and divided by 100, 104 divided by 100 is 1.04. Now, again, remember, 104... Goodness, 104% literally translates to 104 out of 100. So we divide by 100 and we get 1.04 for the decimal. Now 1.04 for the decimal, how do we make that a fraction? Well, there are two ways we can do it. We can make a mixed number or an improper fraction, but this decimal goes to the tenths and then the hundredths place. So we could take the 104 and put it out of 100 because it goes to the hundredth place. And then this one is going to reduce. So let me put in my 104 over 100, and I get the same decimal, you can see it, 1.04. If I want the fraction reduced, I'm going to hit the little fraction button in blue, and it's going to show me that 26/25. 26/25 is my reduced fraction. Now, if I wanted to, I could also make this a mixed number. I could say that it's 1 whole, and then 4 out of 100, and that would be equal to 1 and 4 out of 100, just so you can see it, is 0.004, but the fraction is 1/25. So, or you can have your mixed numbers. Now I think improper fractions I would prefer. I don't really know in general. I don't know that one is, you know, better than the other. I think improper fractions are a little more preferred after the grade school level, but their equivalence doesn't really matter. Okay? All right, so now we're going to look at a couple of percent problems where you have to be able to find missing amounts. You know, like what's 5% of 52, or 18 is what percent of 30, or those types of problems. And there are lots of ways to solve those types of problems. Sometimes I use formulas. I teach formulas. I think when you work on these problems in Math Lab, it introduces a formula, but I'm going to try to show you a way to do this where you're literally just going to translate. And then if the way doesn't work for you, feel free when you're working on Math Lab to look at the Help Me, and they'll show you how to use a formula. But I think that you'll be able to manage with just the translating. So we're going to take the problem that we're looking at and we're going to translate into an equation. So there are three key things that you're going to be translating. You're going to see the word is in your problem, and is, you have to know, is going to translate into an equal sign. And you're going to see the word of, and of means to multiply. And then you're going to be looking for some unknown value. So if there's an unknown value, we're going to assign it a variable. You can use whatever variable you want. I'm probably going to use x. And then if you have a percent, then your percent has to be converted to a decimal or a fraction. So percents have to be converted. Now, I like to say the word percents. I just want you to, so I wanted to point out here that in the notes I didn't type the word percents. It didn't like that word, so I don't know if that's not grammatically correct, but it liked percentages. I think they're the same thing, but I think the plural for percent is technically percentages. That's what the spell check liked when I was typing this anyway. All right, so let's try this out, and I know you've seen these problems before, but here's an example of what I'm talking about. So it says, what is 60% of 80? So we're going to translate this. What means we don't know what we're looking for there. That is our variable, let's call that x, is our equal sign. 60% is going to translate or be converted into a fraction or a decimal. So 60% we could say is 60 out of 100. And if you want the decimal to make that 0.6 the same thing. And then of means to multiply, and then it's 80. So multiply by 80. And now literally no work to solve here. This is just putting 60 over 100 times 80 into the calculator. So we have 60 over 100 and then times 80, and we get 48. So what is 60% of 48, or of 80? It's 48. Okay, let's try this again. So we have 162 is 18% of what number? So we're going to start with 162, and then we have is our equal sign. Then we have 18%, which again, you could make that a decimal of 0.18 or make it 18 out of 100. And then it says of, that's multiply by, and then what number? We don't know, so let's call it x. Okay, if we want to solve this, x is being multiplied by 18 over 100, so we can divide both sides by 18 over 100. And that's going to cancel that, so x is going to equal, let's put this mess into the calculator. So I have 162, and it's going to be divided by 18 over 100. And again, if you wanted to make that a decimal, less to type in, it's totally your preference. But we get 900. So 162 is 18% of what number? The number is 900. 162 is 18% of 900. Okay, let's try that again. So this one, 135 is what percent of 160? So 135, all right, put that first, and then is our equal sign. And then what percent? We don't know, let's call it x. Of means multiply, and then 160. So this time to solve for x, if it's being multiplied by 160, we're going to divide both sides by 160. So that cancels that, and x is equal to, let's take 135 and divide it by 160, and we get 0.84375. So 0.84375, which translates to, if we were to multiply by 100, multiplied by 100 translates into 84.375%. And if you had rounded that to, let's just say 84 or 84.4 or something, it's fine. It doesn't really say anything about rounding, so if you wanted to round that, that'd be totally fine. All right, 2/9% of 2,700 is how much? So 2/9%. 2/9% means 2/9 out of 100. Again, if you want to make it a decimal, you can, but percent literally means out of 100, so I'm going to put it out of 100. So there's that, and then we have of, which means multiply by, and then we have 2,700, and then we have our is our equal sign, and then how much? We don't know. Let's call it x. So again, no solving here to figure out what our number is. It's just going to a calculator. So I'm going to go to my calculator, and let's see. Make a fraction on the top of it. I'm going to put in my 2/9. Whoops. 2/9. And then on the bottom, I'm going to put my 100, and then multiplying that by 2,700. And I'm looking at 6. All of that means 6. So 2/9% of 2,700 is 6. Okay, so we're going to be looking at using the same process, but now in a word problem, and these will obviously be a little more tricky. So you have to try to figure out what the underlying question is here, and then it will work just like the other ones. So it says a Yahoo question of the week asked, at what age do you consider someone old? Which is a scary question the older you get. Out of 3,496 people who responded, 1,017 said age 80 is old. So what percent of respondents believe that age 80 is old? So what percent of respondents believe 80 is old? They're really asking you here, what percent of the respondents, that's all 3,496, believe 80 is old. So what percent of that is the 1,017 people who said age 80 is old? That's the real underlying question. So if I went to translate this, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog. He's not usually in here with me. I gotta let him out. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Hang on, guys. Dog, go. Kill my video here. He wants to follow me everywhere. So today I let him in, and what does he do? Okay, I'm so sorry. So what percent of 3,496 is 1,017 is the underlying question. So what percent? We don't know. We're going to call that x. Of means multiply, 3,496. And then there's our equal sign, and then 1,017. So to solve this for x, all I have to do is divide that 3,496 over. Divide and divide. That makes this cancel. So x is going to equal, let's see, 1017 divided by 3,496. That is 0.2909. 2909. And then if we multiply by 100, we can see that that is 29.09%. Okay, and I'm just showing you one approach to these problems. If you can look at these a different way and arrive at the answer, then by all means do that. Let me just fix my arrow here. Okay, so if you have another way, learned another way before, or can look at this differently and arrive at the answer, you do not have to use my method. I just want to show you how my brain is working here, okay? Let's try another one. 84% of the schools in the United States have transitioned to online classes. That's a true stat. I looked that up. If there are 1,200 schools in Arizona, how many of them have transitioned to online schools? So 1,200 schools in Arizona, how many of them have transitioned? So the real underlying question here is, what is 84%? What is 84% of 1,200, right? We have 1,200 schools in Arizona. If 84% of schools have transitioned, we need to know what is 84% of that 1,200. So now we're going to translate. What we don't know is our equal sign. 84% we're going to convert into 84 out of 100. Of is our multiply, and then 1,200. So again, no solving here. X is by itself. We just need to put that expression into the calculator. So 84 over 100 multiplied by 1,200 is 1,008. So if there were 1,200 schools, I don't know if that's true. I couldn't find the exact number of schools in Arizona. But if there were 1,200 schools in Arizona, we would expect 1,008 of them to have transitioned to online classes. So 1,008 schools. And I guess over here we should have said 29.09% of respondents believe that 80 is old. Okay, last one. Let's see. Melissa wishes to buy a house for $287,000. To obtain a mortgage, mortgage is a fancy name for a loan for that house, she needs to pay 20% of the selling price as a down payment. So we got to figure out what her down payment is. So she's got to pay 20% of the price. So really this is asking what is 20% of that $287,000 price. So the underlying question is, what is 20% of $287,000? Okay, so let's translate this. What we don't know is our equal sign. 20% becomes 20 out of 100, and then of is multiply by 287,000. Okay, again, no solving. X is by itself. It's just a matter of typing this into the calculator, which, as you have seen in watching my videos, I can screw up. All right, so be careful typing this into the calculator. 20 over 100, and then we are going to multiply by $287,000, and that's 57,400. So if Melissa wants to buy this house, she has to come up with $57,400 for a down payment. Whoops. Tap it on that. I do not know. And that's a steep amount of money, but to be honest, depending on how the market is, typically you want to put 20% down on a house, or banks will require 20% down on a house. If you can make that 20% or more, then you don't have to pay PMIs, property mortgage insurance, and we're going to talk about that more later, but it sounds like a lot of money, but that's a pretty standard down payment. So if you can't afford that much, guess what? Gotta look for a cheaper house. All right. Anyway, I think these should suffice for what you're going to see in your homework, and really this is